Hi there, I'm Dan Kohn. I'm the executive director of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. My Twitter's right there, at DanKohn1, if you want to reach me after this. CNCF is the nonprofit open source software foundation that hosts Kubernetes and a bunch of other projects. And I really want to compliment Alessandro and all the other organizers here. We've had a plan now for like 9 months to create Kubernetes community days and partner with organizations around the world to let them run their own conferences that we can help promote. We got a little bit of a slow start on this, or just like all software, got delayed a tiny bit, and so we weren't actually able to help them promote this that much, but this is fantastic. I'm so thrilled to have this as basically the first Kubernetes community days, and now we're gonna have a bunch more around the world. And so especially for folks from other areas, we would really love to have you look into it, consider running your own event in other places. Let me ask, how many of you went to KubeCon Barcelona in May? Great, okay, so smattering, couple dozen. And we are gonna be, and how many are planning to be at KubeCon San Diego in November? Little less, understandably. Well, the great news is we're gonna be back here in Amsterdam on March 31st with what will be the largest ever open source developer conference in Europe. And so my hope is that this day and the connections you make here are gonna whet your interest enough that you will wanna come. And then I particularly wanna say October 2nd is when the call for papers opens up. And we would love to see a ton of you submit talks for KubeCon Amsterdam. That we think this is, we would really love to get a lot of local folks speaking there. Okay, so I want to give a talk about stitching things together. This is a list of the graduated and incubating projects that we support and host. And here's a picture of our much smaller conference in Barcelona 2 years ago. Let's zoom in on the back there. Orchestration, containerization, microservices. This is our shorthand for explaining what we mean by cloud native. But last year, our technical oversight committee came up with a much more expansive characterization. The CNCF Cloud Native Definition version 1.0. It includes ideas like declarative APIs, resiliency, observability, an ecosystem of open source vendor-neutral projects. One word that's not included in the definition is Kubernetes. That's because Kubernetes is the leading cloud-native implementation, but certainly not the only one. So why is it that we have this KubeCon event with 8,000 people in Barcelona and probably more than 10,000 here in Amsterdam, but not a conference around different cloud-native platforms? Or more succinctly, why Kubernetes? Let's travel back in time a bit to look at the question of why certain technologies win out. We'll start in the year 2004. A social networking entrepreneur met with a number of Silicon Valley investors, including Napster founder Sean Parker. The founder launched at his Ivy League university, dropped out of school, and then expanded his social network to many other campuses, building the site to hundreds of thousands of users. I'm talking, of course, about Campus Network, started at Columbia University by Adam Goldberg a month before Mark Zuckerberg launched the Facebook at Harvard. So why were these two incredibly similar sites both developed at essentially the same time? I found my answer playing a game. How many of you have ever played Sid Meier's Civilization? Oh, there's some hands. Knew this was the right crowd. So yeah, me too, and Civ 6 is my 12-year-old's favorite game. One of Sid Meier's greatest innovations was to explicitly map out a technology tree. If you want to add knights as a warrior for your civilization, you have to first develop the stirrup to domesticate horses and metalworking to create armor. The development of new technologies depends on the availability and sometimes the ubiquity of other technologies. Both Campus Network and the Facebook depended on personal computers and the internet being available in dorm rooms, as well as a whole set of other technologies, such as algorithms for efficient graph traversal. And this process of simultaneous invention is something that we see throughout history. Let's go back further in time to 1858. This is a picture of the British naturalist who collected beetles and spent his formative years as a scientist documenting the natural history of whales. He went on a multi-year expedition in the mid-1800s to collect specimens. After reading a book on population growth by Thomas Malthus, he formulated the theory of evolution. I'm not speaking of Charles Darwin, another British naturalist who collected beetles, studied Welsh natural history, went on a multi-year expedition, and 11 years earlier, after reading the same book by Malthus, discovered evolution. No, the man on the left is Alfred Russel Wallace, and history knows him as the other person who discovered evolution. Quote, the centrifugal governor of the steam engine checks and corrects any irregularities almost before they become evident. And in like manner, no deficiency of the animal kingdom can ever reach any magnitude. That's Wallace describing control theory, which is central to how both evolution and Kubernetes work. We can go back further to 1687 and see Gottfried Leibniz and Isaac Newton independently discovering the calculus. And finally, we have John Tyndall. He's often credited with first establishing in 1859 that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas that leads to climate change. Standing in for Eunice Newton Foote, we have the cover of her scientific paper. She made and published the greenhouse gas discovery 3 years earlier. Despite her prior publication and also being a signatory at Seneca Falls, the first women's rights convention, no image of Foote has been found, and her discovery was not credited until 2010. Simultaneous invention is the concept that certain ideas are in the air. The prerequisite inventions have been made, and now it just takes a spark of creativity and a lot of effort to build the next step in the technology tree. Simultaneous invention is a common occurrence through history. So now let's return to this decade and the cloud-native definition. A number of companies have found the challenge of building and running applications at scale. And with the prerequisite technologies having become available, including the internet and Linux, a Cambrian explosion of container orchestrators was created. These systems, each of which follow the cloud-native definition, enabled these companies to reach web scale with fewer servers and fewer staff than would have been possible before. They include Alibaba Sigma, Amazon Apollo, Apache Mesos, Baidu Matrix, Cloud Foundry Garden and Diego, CoreOS Fleet, Docker Swarm, Facebook Tupperware, and finally, Google Borg and Omega. No, just kidding, we're only halfway through. There's also HashiCorp Nomad, IBM Platform Symphony, Joyent Triton, Lyft v3 Infra, Microsoft Service Fabric, Netflix Titus, Rancher Cattle, Red Hat OpenShift v2 Broker, Spotify Helios, Tencent Gaia, Twitter Aurora, and Uber Peloton. So, how are all of these organizations able to develop similar approaches to their scaling challenges? You could say that the prerequisite technologies were in the air. As Isaac Newton wrote, we stand on the shoulders of giants, which is what Newton was doing when he adapted that saying from Bernard de Chartres, which is what I am doing in that I reuse those two quotes from the fantastic video essay, Everything is a Remix. But now, let's return firmly to the present. Most of you will hopefully be able to join us at KubeCon Cloud Native Con Amsterdam in March 2020. Many other technologies had to be developed before Cloud Native could emerge. Why aren't you going to be attending HeliosCon or MatrixCon or ApolloCon? These are the results of web searches on some of the open source cloud native offerings over the last 3 years. What is responsible for Kubernetes' extraordinary growth? Let's finally try to answer the earlier question, why Kubernetes? In my view, there's 3 main reasons. Number 1, it works really well. Kubernetes was not just built on a decade of learning within Google from Borg and Omega, but has now incorporated key architectural ideas from Red Hat, Huawei, and dozens of other companies. Number 2, vendor-neutral open source. Enterprises that are going to build on top of a platform want to see multiple companies backing a technology so they're not locked into a single vendor. No one wants to have to pay a platform tax for the lifetime of their application. From the beginning, Google explicitly encouraged developers from other companies to take leadership roles. In fact, CNCF was created within the Linux Foundation to provide a neutral home for cloud-native technologies and has worked through programs like Certified Kubernetes to ensure that the ecosystem does not fragment. Number 3, it's the people. Kubernetes, like Soylent Green, is people. Couple chuckles. The project has been developed by an extraordinary group of contributors, has done an impressive job onboarding new users, what's been called the time to first serotonin, and has explicitly worked to narrow the distance between the steps of the contributor ladder, from user to contributor to reviewer to leader. So, these are my 3 ideas on the reasons for success, but I'd love to hear yours, either here at the event or on Twitter. And the thought I want to leave you with is how deliberate all 3 elements of Kubernetes' success have been. To quote the climate writer David Roberts, stitching things together, building up institutions that work, figuring out how to keep diverse interests on the same page is difficult emotionally and intellectually. The magic of the technology tree is that we can only be here because our predecessors have developed extraordinary innovations like Linux and TCP/IP, and in a bigger sense, evolution, the calculus, and the cause of climate change. And the work that we're doing here together, building on the shoulders of giants, may be neither swift nor easy, but it is also laying the foundations of the next generation of innovations, which are even now being built on top of Kubernetes. We, all of us, are part of the cloud-native community. I entreat us to collaborate together in a spirit of kindness and with an awareness of history this week and hereafter. Thank you very much.